never thought I'd see the day my daughter stopped seeing me as her mom. We were sitting at dinner. My fork was halfway to my mouth when she said it, plain as day. Honestly, I wish I had a mom like Lorraine. She's going to be the real grandmother to our baby. Not just, you know. She didn't even look at me. Just said it like I wasn't sitting 2 feet away. Like I hadn't raised her with scraped hands, sleepless nights, and quiet sacrifices. The room went still. No one spoke. No clinking glasses. Just the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Her husband let out a soft laugh, not even looking up from his wine glass. My sister shifted awkwardly in her seat. And me? My jaw dropped. For a second. Then it locked so tight I thought it might crack. I placed my knife and napkin down slowly, folded them neatly. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't break. I looked her straight in the eyes, the same eyes that used to fill with tears in the middle of the night when she'd cry out for me after her dad died. Then she can pay your bills from now on, I said. Not yelling. Not crying. Just done. I pushed my chair back. The scrape of the wood on the floor was loud, sharp, like a gavel in a courtroom. No one tried to stop me. No one asked if I was okay. I walked out of my own house that night. No bag. No plan. I didn't even close the front door behind me. 2 blocks away, I realized my hands were clenched so tight they hurt. I sat down at a rusty old bus stop bench, paint peeling, stories soaked into the wood. And I felt nothing. No rage. No heartbreak. Just a heavy, quiet emptiness. And one question kept rising up in me like a lump I couldn't swallow. When did I stop being her mother and start being her maid? This wasn't the first time she compared me to Lorraine, her mother-in-law. That woman with her string of pearls and sugar-coated advice. Always smiling, always baking something, always hosting something. Paige adored her. Or maybe she adored the picture-perfect life Lorraine seemed to offer. But tonight she chose. And she didn't just think it, she said it out loud. In front of everyone. That wasn't a slip. That was a statement. And the worst part? She didn't even look guilty. She meant it. So I let her. And for the first time in my life, I didn't beg to be loved back. I walked around for hours, under the big old maple trees near our block. Let the cool night air wash over me. Let the hurt settle. By the time the street lights came on, I quietly let myself back inside. That house knew me. It held our stories. The sound of her reading at age 6, calling me Mama. The scratch on the kitchen table from the night she cried about her divorce, both of us too tired to notice the pen had gouged the wood. All those memories. And none of it seemed to matter anymore. I walked down the hallway, past the picture wall. I hadn't added new ones in over a year. She stopped sending them after she married Cole. His mom's a professional photographer, she'd said, brushing me off. Like the snapshots I took on my cracked phone were worthless. I stepped into the nursery I'd started fixing up the day she told me she was pregnant. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of love. Soft green walls, curtains I sewed by hand, and a second-hand rocking chair I'd reupholstered myself. On the shelf were all the stuffed animals she once loved. I saved them. Cleaned them. Got them ready for a grandchild I dreamed of rocking to sleep. I sat on the bed and rested my hand on the tiny baby head I'd knitted just 2 weeks ago. Pale blue, with a shiny little silver button on top. She never asked for it. I just made it. Like I always did. I thought about her dad, how hard things were after he passed. She was 16, lost and angry. And I was just tired. Tired from holding everything together. I picked up extra shifts. Gave up our savings so she wouldn't miss out on college. Sold our vacation fund to buy her a used car. No one clapped for that. But I remember sitting in the laundry room with the dryer running, crying into a towel so she wouldn't hear me. I raised her without help. Without applause. Without ever once giving up. And now she sat at my table, calling another woman her real mother. Like I hadn't given up my whole life for her. The old me would have stayed quiet. Would have made her a casserole the next day just to keep the peace. Would have shown up with a paintbrush and a fake smile. But I'm not her anymore. I walked into the kitchen and pulled the casserole I had made yesterday from the fridge, ziti with bechamel sauce. Her favorite. Then I paused. And for the first time in a long, long time, I thought about what I needed. I took the casserole, her favorite, and dropped it right into the trash. It was still warm. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard her voice from years ago, "Mom, you're too practical. You never spoil anyone." I laughed back then, not knowing that someday, the very thing that kept us alive would be used against me. She didn't want the safety I gave her. She wanted sparkles. She wanted flash. She forgot how I kept us fed during hard times. How I held her when her card got declined in college, how I sent her money before she could even ask. How I covered her rent quietly, without ever bringing it up, when Cole lost his job. Or maybe she didn't forget. Maybe she remembered every bit of it. And just decided it wasn't enough. That Thursday, I showed up early to the community center. Margaret was already there, fussing with the chairs and thermostat like she always did. The place smelled like cinnamon and old hymn books, like time had slowed down just for us. "You look pale," she said, squinting at me. "Are you sleeping okay?" I lied. "Yeah, I'm fine." Because really, what do you say? That your daughter threw your love out like trash and handed your place to someone else? That you spent 30 years pouring yourself into someone who now treats you like an afterthought? But Margaret's known me since before I was Mrs. Talbot, before I was Paige's mom. She sat down beside me, took my hand, and said what she always does when she knows I'm hurting. "Don't hold it in. It'll rot you from the inside." So I told her about the dinner, about the words, about the baby booties still sitting untouched in the nursery. Margaret went completely still. Then her face changed, soft, protective, and furious all at once. "She said that to your face? While you were right there?" I nodded. "I always knew that girl resented your steadiness," she said. "You didn't spoil her like the Mitchells. But damn it, Evelyn, you gave her everything." I was never the fun one, I whispered. Not like her mother-in-law, with her wine nights and matching Christmas pajamas. Margaret turned fully toward me. "She doesn't get to rewrite the story," she said. "Just because it's easier to love someone who buys matching outfits. You were the one who held her life together. You gave her college. You bailed her out when that mortgage mess hit. You picked up her broken pieces again and again." I didn't say anything, but something inside me shifted. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. I began slowly, I think she's always seen my love as something with strings attached. Because I didn't sugarcoat life. You gave her dignity, Margaret said. And now she's ashamed of the mirror you held up. That hit hard. Maybe I reminded Paige of everything she wanted to forget, being broke, being lost, being raised by a mother who didn't wrap hard lessons in pretty bows. Sunday morning, I got to church early like I always do. I sat near the back, not because I'm humble, just out of habit. I liked watching people come in, nodding to one another, falling into their little routines. Even when your own child treats you like you don't matter, strangers still give you a smile, a quiet respect. Paige was there. She hadn't seen me slip in. She was standing in the hallway, talking to one of the younger women. Her voice was light and cheerful, her belly round in a fitted blue dress. She looked like a magazine cover. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. But I heard her anyway. "My mom," Paige said, with a fake little laugh, "she's always been difficult. Very bitter. Never really supported my dreams. Just wanted me to be practical, like her." The woman nodded like people do when they're hearing a sob story. Paige went on. "Her heart was in the right place, I guess. But she never really believed in me. I used to beg her to come to my art shows. She'd always say she had to work late or that it wasn't practical. I think that kind of judgment sticks with you." I froze. Not because of what she said, but because of how easily she said it. Like she'd practiced it. Like it was the version of me she chose to keep. I remembered that art show. She was 19. It was the night before her loan payment was due. She wanted me to come see some black and white photos of her ex-boyfriend's apartment floor. I had just pulled a double shift. I told her I'd come the next day. She cried. I still sent flowers. That became, she never supported my dreams. I bit down on the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. Not because I was angry, but because I needed to stay quiet. Because this wasn't just a rewrite of the story. This was an eraser. Every night I worked extra hours in the ER. Every side hustle I picked up so she could have new ballet shoes. Every birthday cake made from scratch because I couldn't afford the bakery ones. Gone. Wiped clean. In Paige's version of the story, everything I gave her turned into bitterness. I slipped out of church before the sermon even started. I didn't say goodbye. Not because I was angry, but because I finally got it. She wasn't just ashamed of me. She needed me to be her excuse. Tuesday morning, the sun came in through the kitchen window, soft and quiet, like it was trying not to bother me. I moved slowly. Washed my teacup. Folded the dish towel. Straightened the mail. Everything I did felt careful, almost like I was getting ready for something big, but wasn't quite ready to say it out loud. By 10 a.m., I was walking through the doors of Bradley and Miles, a downtown law office. The place was still. Too quiet for a room where people's lives change on paper. A young woman offered me coffee, but I said no. I wasn't there to be comforted. I was there to turn a page. The receptionist handed me a clipboard. "Just those updates you requested, Miss Langford." I didn't even flinch at the name. I hadn't used Mrs. since her father passed. Just Evelyn Langford now. No title. No decoration. Just me. The lawyer's name was Darius. Nice enough. Young, not much older than Paige. He smiled politely and motioned for me to sit across from his big glass desk. You wanted to discuss your will, he asked, sliding a folder toward me. No, I said, setting down my purse. I want to change it. His pen paused. Removing someone? Yes. He asked for the name. I looked him straight in the eye. Paige Langford. My only child. He looked surprised. Would you like to name a different beneficiary? I already have. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my purse and handed it to him. It wasn't angry. Just honest. He opened it carefully and read. I want the money I set aside for her inheritance to go toward a scholarship, I said. For single mothers. Practical women. The kind who've been holding everything together with no one telling them they matter. He blinked. Taken aback. No family at all? I leaned back in my chair. Family isn't just blood. It's who shows up. The paperwork didn't take long. Everything moved smoothly. The signatures were clean. The final stamp of it all felt peaceful. And as I signed the last page, something inside me loosened. Like I'd been holding my breath for a decade, and finally let it go. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't punishment. It was release. I walked out of that office lighter than I'd felt in years. The city moved around me, people honking, rushing to lunches and meetings. But I didn't rush. I stopped at a little bakery and bought myself a raspberry scone. Still warm. Not for Paige. Not for anyone. Just for me. Back home, I pulled out a box I hadn't touched in nearly 10 years. It sat at the back of the linen closet under old towels and candles that were never lit. The cardboard was soft, a little worn at the edges, but it held. I carried it to the kitchen table and opened it. Inside were letters. Stacks and stacks of them. Every one from Robert, Paige's father. My husband. Gone 22 years this May. He wrote constantly. Every work trip. Every overnight shift at the factory. Paige used to roll her eyes at them. Dad's letters always say the same thing, she'd grumble. Be good to Mom. Take your vitamins. But I saved every single one. I opened the one he wrote for her 3rd birthday. Evelyn. She's got your fire. I see it already. Don't worry if she pushes against the rules. She'll thank you one day, when the world stops spoiling her. Another letter was from the week she broke her arm on the jungle gym. I wish I'd been there. But I'm glad she had you. She always has you. And then I found the one he wrote the week Paige got accepted into college. He'd underlined these words: you were never soft. You were steady. She'll forget the difference until she needs it again. But don't let that harden you. There's strength in being the rock, not the sea. Don't apologize for being the one who held it all together. I don't know why those words hit me the way they did that morning. Maybe because I finally felt seen. He knew me. The real me. The woman who kept the lights on when the money ran out. The mother who taught her daughter how to stand on her own instead of beg for help. The wife who patched the roof herself because there was no one else to call. The woman who cooked every night, even when no one remembered she was tired too. I looked out the window at the backyard, the same view I'd had for decades, and I breathed. The peonies in the garden bloomed early this year, big, bright, and pink, like they didn't care if someone thought they were old-fashioned. Maybe I was like that too now. I wasn't trying to please anyone anymore. I folded up the letters carefully, tied them with a ribbon, and placed them next to the scholarship papers. I had no intention of begging Paige to remember the truth. That afternoon, just as I was repotting the basil, the phone rang. At first, I wasn't going to pick up. But then I saw Paige's name on the screen, and curiosity won. I wiped my hands on a towel, took a deep breath, and answered. Hi Mom, she said, her voice a little too cheerful. Hope this isn't a bad time. I'm home, I replied, calm and steady, but I've got a few things going on. She paused for a second, then continued in that same fake happy voice. We're finally working on the baby's room, and I thought maybe you could come help pick out paint colors. You've always been good at that. I stared at the phone for a moment, like it might explain her sudden change of heart. 2 weeks ago, I barely existed to her. Now I'm useful again, because I'm good with colors? I brought the phone back to my ear. I've got other priorities right now. A longer pause this time. Oh, she said, surprised. Like what? I smiled a little. There it was. That moment when she realized I wasn't the same anymore. I'm working on something personal, I said gently. And honestly, I'm not free to help decorate. The silence on her end stretched out, thick, uncomfortable. She was clearly annoyed. Oh well, I didn't realize you were so busy. She said, sarcasm dripping from every word. I answered plainly. And I don't make time anymore for people who only call when they want something. That landed. I could feel it, even through the phone. Her tone shifted, trying To sound kind again, but I could hear the cracks. That's not fair, Mom. I just thought it might be nice, for the baby. I thought we could do something together. Is that what you thought? I asked quietly, when you called Lorraine the real grandmother at dinner? She didn't answer. Did you think of me then? I asked again, more firmly. When you said it, when you didn't even look at me, did you forget I spent 3 months knitting baby booties and folding onesies for a room I'm not even welcome in? Her voice dropped. I didn't mean it like that. But you said it like that, I said, my voice colder now. And you didn't take it back. There was a long, breathless silence. I imagined her swallowing her pride, or maybe just shocked by the version of me she was hearing for the first time. Well, she finally said, I guess I didn't realize it hurt you that much. There it was, the soft arrogance of someone who's never heard no before. I'm not hurting, I said. I'm just not pretending it didn't happen. I let that sit for a moment, then added, I wish you well, Paige. I really do. But I'm not going to shrink myself just to fit into your life the way you want. She let out a small, bitter laugh. So what, you're done with me now? No, I said calmly. I'm done begging for a place I already earned a long time ago. Then, I did something she never expected, I hung up. I put the phone face down on the table. My heart was racing, not from fear, but from something clean and strong. Like finally breaking a pattern I had been stuck in for years. And then came the silence, pure and still. For the first time, I hadn't apologized. I didn't offer to bake cookies or soften my voice to keep the peace. I just said no. That's when the whispers started, like poison spreading slowly. Margaret told me first. We were sitting in the church hall, folding programs for the charity auction. She leaned in close and whispered, you should know, I heard Linda Fay at the salon. She said Paige has been telling people you're not well. I looked up slowly. Not well? She's saying you've been forgetful, keeping to yourself, maybe it's early memory loss. The words hung in the air like a bad smell. Margaret looked worried. I didn't believe it, of course, she added. But that's what's being said. That you left the baby shower group because you're confused? Like you can't manage simple things anymore. I blinked, once, twice. I didn't feel confused. I felt furious. Not the loud kind of anger, but the kind that sharpens your focus. That girl, I said quietly, is rewriting history faster than I can tear up the proof. Margaret's jaw tightened. She's trying to make people doubt you before they start asking questions. And just like that, it hit me, Paige knew exactly what she was doing. She knew I'd left, and this time, I wasn't coming back. People were starting to notice, and instead of facing what she did, Paige started spreading a story. One where I wasn't angry or hurt, just unstable. That way, if I ever spoke up, no one would believe me. They'd already have a reason to doubt me. I was folding the last program when my hands started shaking. She doesn't want to deal with the fallout, I said. She wants to erase the people who remember what really happened. Margaret didn't say anything at first. Then she quietly pulled a small leather journal out of her purse and slid it across the table. What's this? I asked. Record, she said. Start 1. Write everything down, what she said, when she said it, what really happened. If she's going to question your memory, show her just how sharp it still is. I brought the journal home. I didn't write in it for 3 days, not because I was scared, but because I wanted that first page to count. When I finally opened it, I started with the dinner. The night everything changed. I wrote about the yellow dress Paige wore, how her voice didn't even shake when she called Lorraine the real grandmother. I wrote how the whole room froze. How I stood up, said my piece, walked out, and how nobody stopped me. Then I wrote about the phone call. About her pretending nothing happened. About paint colors and fake kindness and how she twisted my no into something mean. Then the rumors, that I was forgetful, confused, not safe to be around a baby. I wrote it all down, in big, clear print, clear enough for anyone to read without squinting. I included my bank records, the date of my last dentist appointment, even copies of the scholarship papers. I gathered statements from the women in my quilting circle, women who had seen me drive, organize, cook, and budget better than most folks half my age. By the end of the week, I had a binder so detailed, it could rival a tax audit. I didn't make copies. Not yet. But I labeled it clearly and locked it in a fireproof safe. Then I got dressed, baked a batch of lemon bars, and went to quilting. Group like nothing had happened. I smiled. I stitched. And when June Peters gently pulled me aside and whispered, someone said you've been acting a little strange. But you seem just fine to me, I looked her straight in the eye. Paige's guilt doesn't match the story she's telling, I said. So now she's trying to make me look like the problem. June gave a slow nod, then said something. That stuck with me. You don't seem like a woman who's fading, she said. You seem like one who's about to rise. The next week, we were working on a memory quilt for the community center's silent auction. I picked a bluebird for my square, Paige's favorite bird when she was little. Margaret stitched sunflowers beside me, her eyes glancing at me every so often with quiet worry. "Are you sure you want to keep coming?" she asked softly. "With what people are saying?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my tote bag, pulled out the binder, and placed it on the table. Not to make a scene, just to show them I wasn't hiding. "I want people to see," I said gently. "I want them to know I'm not ashamed." I slid the binder toward June. She looked surprised. "What is this?" she asked. "Clarity," I replied. "Everything Paige said I forgot. Everything she claimed I couldn't do. It's all here, my schedule, my medical records, letters from friends, people I've worked beside for years. Proof." The room went still. Not awkward, just silent, like a storm had passed just out of reach. June slowly opened the binder. Her face changed as she flipped through the pages, from confused, to thoughtful, to impressed. "She's trying to erase you," she said, her voice tight. I nodded. "But I know who I am." And then something shifted in the room, like a stitch pulled through fabric. Beth leaned in and said, "I remember when you ran that meal train for Judy after her hip surgery. You were the only one who brought a full dinner and stayed to do the dishes." Gretchen added, "You balanced all the fundraiser books last year, every single number was exact." Even quiet Lorraine D., who rarely spoke at all, whispered, "You taught me how to sew a zipper that doesn't bunch." I wasn't even part of the class. But one by one, the women around me spoke like they were waking up to something they'd always known but had forgotten for a little while. Paige could gossip with the neighbors. She could twist dates, spin stories, and act like the victim. But not here. Not in this room. Here, I wasn't just Evelyn, the mother. I was Evelyn, the one who always showed up. The one who baked, stitched, solved problems. The one they counted on. Their friend. After the meeting, June caught me by the coffee table. Her eyes were steady. "If anyone repeats those rumors," she said firmly, "they'll have to say them to all of us." I didn't cry. But something deep inside me finally let go. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I wasn't alone. And I didn't need to shout to be heard. That night, I came home and placed the binder back in the safe, not because I was scared, but because it had done its job. I stood in the quiet of my living room and felt something new, peace. I didn't have to defend who I had been anymore. I just had to live who I was now, openly, fully, and with grace. So I made a choice. I would stop explaining myself. I would stop letting Paige take up so much space in my thoughts. It was time to begin something new. I pulled out an old notebook and wrote one sentence, applied to volunteer at the library. It seemed small, but it wasn't. It was a promise to myself, that from now on, I'd put my time and energy into places where I was welcomed, respected, and needed. Not to prove anything. Just because I deserve peace. A few days later, a soft blue card showed up at my door, hand-delivered by Paige's husband. I didn't invite him in. He stood there like someone sent to deliver bad news but with a smile taped over it. "My mom wanted to have tea with you," he said, a little awkward. "Thought maybe you two could, smooth things over. No need for all this tension." He was polite. Too polite. Like he was just the messenger. I almost said no right then and there, but something in me said, go. Not for them. For me. I put on my favorite sweater, the one Paige once said made me look like a church pew. I wore it anyway. It was warm. And it didn't pretend to be something. It wasn't. Just like me. The house smelled like fancy candles and soft perfume. Everything was pastel and perfectly in place. The tea was too bitter, and the cookies were store-bought. She smiled like we were old friends. Like nothing had happened. "I just hate to see families drift apart," she said sweetly. "I know Paige can be passionate. But she means well. She just wants to feel supported." I looked around at the neat counters and the signs that said family first and bless this mess. It felt fake. Pretty, but cold. Like a hug from someone who doesn't mean it. She kept going. "Paige told me. You two had a falling out. And I thought, maybe we could come together, for the baby's sake. I know you've always wanted to be involved." I took a sip of the bitter tea and set the cup down gently. "You already took the role," I said calmly. "You don't need me." Her smile twitched, unsure whether to push or back off. "I'm not angry," I added. "I'm clear. There's a difference." She blinked, clearly caught off guard. "But surely there's room for more than one grandmother," she said. "Room? Sure," I said. "But not without respect." That stopped her. "I raised Paige when no one else would," I said, standing up. "Not because I wanted applause, but I won't be erased either." I buttoned my coat slowly. "Enjoy your tea," I said softly. "And your title? You've earned her praise." Then I walked out. Not angry. Not bitter. Just free, because not every invitation is a second chance. Some are just traps, pretending to be peace offerings. And I've crossed enough bad bridges in my life to know when to turn around. A week later, the library asked me to speak at a small community gathering. Margaret had submitted my name without telling me. I almost said no, but I didn't. I stood in front of a half circle of folding chairs. Most of the audience were women, some retired, some still figuring life out. My hands were wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold. I wasn't always alone, I began, but I've often felt invisible. A few women nodded. Quiet, knowing nods. I raised a daughter who doesn't see me as part of her success. Just the silence she outgrew. That hit home. I saw it in their eyes, that look you get when someone finally says what you've felt but never had the words for. That ache you carry when you gave your whole body, your time, your love, and someone later tells you it wasn't enough. I didn't cry. I just kept going. I told them about cooking dinners when the fridge was almost empty. About sewing prom dresses because boutiques were too expensive. About showing up for every job interview with coins fished from couch cushions just to have gas money. I remember taking the letter from the glove box, thinking about how I'd been replaced, just like that, with someone younger, flashier, someone who always smiled and said yes. My daughter tells people I didn't believe in her. I sat quietly and said I was bitter. A woman across from me wiped a tear from her cheek. But belief doesn't always look like cheering from the sidelines. Sometimes it looks like picking up extra shifts so she can take an internship. Sometimes it sounds like, we can't afford art school, but I'll drive you to every gallery until someone remembers your name. The room got quiet then, not an awkward silence, but a sacred one, like everyone was holding something fragile and important together. I smiled gently. I used to think I had to explain myself, to justify the choices I made as her mom. But I don't. I've made it through, and I'm proud of that. When the meeting ended, a few women hugged me. Others just held my hand tight, like I had finally said something they were still too afraid to whisper. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror, not as someone's mother, not as someone's mistake, but as a woman who walked through fire and somehow kept her daughter's feet from ever getting burned. I waited until the morning of her baby shower. I wasn't invited, but I'd known about it for weeks. I saw the photos online, soft pink balloons, a tall fancy cake, a gift list filled with things I used to dream of buying. Truth is, I had already bought many of them quietly, long before the words, real grandmother, broke my heart in two. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat down at my dining table, lit a single candle, and began writing. Dear Paige, this isn't a bitter letter. It's a letter full of truth. You've chosen to erase me from your story, and that's your right. But I won't stay quiet. Just to make your version of things sound nicer. I raised you, not perfectly, but completely. I gave you everything I had, time, hard work, love that wasn't always soft but never once walked away. I won't come to your baby shower. Not because I'm mad, but because I won't sit in a room where I'm both present and unwanted. I've changed my will. This isn't revenge, just a shift. What I leave behind will go where it's respected and wanted. I included the legal papers in this envelope. I also added photos you've clearly forgotten. You in my arms after your first recital, me cheering louder than anyone. You, asleep in my coat when you were sick. Me, holding your college diploma with tears in my eyes, even if you never noticed. These things happened, whether you admit them or not. You've picked a new family now. One that praises you more. That's fine. I won't fight for a place I was never welcomed into. But I will not be erased. If the love that raised you made you better, then be better to her than you were to me. With clarity, Evelyn. There were no tears on the paper. Just my words and a decision. I mailed it that afternoon. No return address. No tracking. She'd know it was from me. She'd know. It was over. 3 days after the shower, I sold the family heirlooms. They'd been tucked away in a cedar chest for years, my mother's locket, the silver tea set from my wedding, the quilt my great-grandmother sewed by hand. Paige always assumed they'd be hers one day. When I have a daughter, she'd say dreamily, I'll pass them down. She never asked if I agreed. She just assumed love meant automatic inheritance. But I realized something, legacy isn't about blood. It's about respect. And respect was something she never really learned. So I called a private buyer. He showed up in white gloves, spoke gently about history and care. I didn't flinch when he gave me the prices. I didn't argue. I just signed the papers, handed everything over, and watched as generations of expectation walked out the door. It didn't feel like a loss. It felt like freedom. That same afternoon, I went online and closed the joint savings account I had opened for Paige years ago. She never added to it, but she sure liked planning around it. I took her off my medical forms, too. And then I blocked her number, not out of anger, but because I needed peace, and sometimes peace starts with silence. The next morning, I changed the locks. Not because she had a key, she didn't. But because I didn't want even the memory of her walking back in. After changing the locks, I walked through my house like I was clearing away smoke. The kind of smoke that clings even after the fire's gone. I opened the windows. Let fresh air in. Dusted the shelves. Then I walked into the nursery. Slowly, I folded the tiny clothes, each piece a memory, and packed up the baby books. I didn't do it to store them away. I was donating them. Somewhere out there, another baby was starting life fresh, and I wanted them to have a beginning that wasn't tangled in guilt. By noon, I pulled up to the women's shelter with a box full of handmade baby things. The young woman at the front desk looked confused when I told her what was inside. All handmade, I said with a little smile. She reached for the box like it was something sacred, like she could feel the love sewn into each piece. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't give her my name. I didn't need praise. I just wanted those good things to end up in a place that deserved them. When I got home, the house felt different, lighter, clearer. Like it finally belonged to me again. I made a sandwich, just something simple, and sat at the kitchen table. The same one where so much hurt had happened. Paige's usual seat was empty, and I let it stay that way. That afternoon, I did one last thing. I went to my computer, logged into the photo cloud account, yes, the one Paige always assumed I'd keep paying for, and downloaded every photo. That still mattered to me. Baby Paige with chocolate on her face. Me and her father holding her in the hospital. Her high school graduation, where I wore my old wedding dress because we couldn't afford anything new. I saved those. Then I deleted the rest. Not to erase her, but to free myself from the version of her who thought I owed her everything, just for being born. When the last picture was gone, I leaned back in my chair and let out a deep breath. I didn't need her thank you. I didn't even need her to say sorry. I just needed her absence. And now, I finally had it. But the peace didn't last long. The next day, just after lunch, she showed up. No call, no knock, just the sound of a car door slamming and those familiar high heels clicking up the path. Paige's face was flushed, her voice tight and angry. "You blocked me," she snapped the second I opened the door. "Are you serious, Mom?" I didn't let her in. I didn't move aside. She waved the letter I'd sent like it was a courtroom summons. "Selling the heirlooms? Changing your will? What the hell is wrong with you?" Her voice rang out down the quiet street. A jogger across the road slowed down. A wind chime tinkled somewhere behind us. Still, I didn't say a word. Instead, I stepped back, picked up a second envelope from the hallway table, and handed it to her. "What's this?" she barked. "Read it when you're alone," I said. "You won't find me waiting here again." Her face twisted, half confusion, half rage. "What's that supposed to mean?" But I didn't answer. I didn't soothe. I didn't offer up my usual silence just to keep her calm. I didn't try to fix it. I stepped past her, got in my car, and drove away. I didn't look back. Because she hadn't come to make things right, she came to claim what she thought still belonged to her. But I had already let it go. Not in anger, in clarity. Let her read that truth somewhere quiet, where there's no one to perform for. Let her sit with the sound of her own pride cracking open. And she did read it. I know she did. I could feel it the next morning, the air in the world felt different. Still. Like after a storm has passed. She didn't call. Didn't show up. But word reached me anyway. Margaret told me Paige called in sick to work. Cancelled some fancy baby shower brunch with Lorraine. Said she wasn't feeling well. I smiled a little. She wasn't sick, she was unraveling. The letter hadn't been cruel. It had just been honest. Quiet, clear, and full of facts. Page 1 was all the financial documents, proof of the scholarships I applied for, the school fees I paid. The dreams I supported, even when she said I didn't. Page 2 had photos, her childhood, her growth, every proud moment. With my handwritten captions. I stood beside her every time, even when she wouldn't turn around to look. Page 3? Baby clothes. Dates sewn into the tags. A receipt from the fabric store dated weeks before she even told me the baby's gender. Page 4 held donation forms, proof that I'd taken the inheritance she refused and turned it into opportunity. For someone who truly needed it. And finally, the last page, my letter. No blame. Just memory. I reminded her how, when she was 5 and couldn't sleep, she wouldn't settle down unless I sang Edelweiss. How I braided her hair for every class photo. How I held her through every heartbreak, especially the ones she never admitted. I reminded her in the letter of that night after her first heartbreak, when I sat beside her and whispered, "You are still enough." I wrote, "You wanted a mom who spoiled you, but I chose to prepare you for a world that never would. You Wanted fairy tales, I gave you a roof, clean sheets, and a pantry that was never empty. You wanted softness, but I gave you strength. And now, after everything, you say I never gave you anything. But the truth is, you're alive because of the things I gave up. You became who you are because I stood in the fire when no one else would. And then I ended it with the one line I knew would sting, not to be mean, but because it was the truth. If she raised you better, be better to her than you were to me. And I signed it, your mother, but no longer your caretaker. I didn't. Add a warm, call me if you want to talk. There was no, let's work this out. Because I didn't need another conversation. I needed the truth to settle into her like winter, quiet, still, undeniable. That night, Margaret called again. She's been quiet, she said, like. It surprised her. It's not the kind of letter you can answer, I told her. It's the kind you either sit with, or run from. Margaret paused. Do you think she'll ever come around? I looked out at the garden. The peonies were starting to fall apart, their soft petals lying gently on the dirt. I don't know, I said. And I'm okay not knowing. Because this wasn't about Paige anymore. It was about me. Then the phone started ringing again, but not from her. From the rest of the family. Aunt Leah called first, her voice small and unsure. I just heard what happened, what you did. With the scholarship. Evelyn, I had no idea. Then came cousin Denise. Then Margaret's sister. Even my late husband's cousin, who hadn't called me in over 7 years. They trickled in like water seeping through cracks in stone, careful. Hesitant, all suddenly remembering I existed. I could hear it in their voices, guilt. Guilt that they believed Paige's side of the story without asking for mine. That they nodded politely when she said I was too strict, too cold, too hard to love. Guilt that they never once said, but, what about Evelyn? And I didn't explain myself. I didn't owe them anything. Every call ended the same way, we'd love to see you sometime. We should have reached out. And every time, I answered, I'm doing just fine. Because I was. I didn't let them in, not fully. Not because I was angry, but because I'd grown past the version of myself who begged to be noticed. I wasn't chasing affection anymore. I was no longer trying to earn a place I already deserved. One evening, Margaret showed up with a casserole and a sly little grin. I heard from June, she said. Apparently Paige's husband, Cole, has been asking questions. I raised an eyebrow. About what? About you. Your will. Your finances. He saw the scholarship announcement and said, Evelyn was always more generous than people gave her credit for. I laughed, half surprise, half exhaustion. Now he wants to rewrite the story. Margaret leaned back in her chair. Men like that always think they can do damage control. But this isn't bad PR. This is her reflection cracking. And maybe he did finally see me clearly. Maybe. The version Paige sold them all is starting to fade. But honestly, it didn't matter. Their approval wouldn't change anything. It only proved what I'd known all along, truth has weight. And eventually, it settles. That same week, I got an invite to some vague little family gathering. No pressure, the message said. Paige would be there. We just miss you. But it was pressure, wrapped in fake warmth and half-hearted apologies. I declined politely. Without anger, just honesty, I wish you well. But I won't put myself back in rooms that forgot me when it mattered. No one replied. I didn't expect them to. And for once, the quiet that followed didn't hurt. Because this time, that silence belonged to me. That Saturday, I bought myself a pair of pearl earrings. Nothing fancy. Just simple. Beautiful. I wore them to church the next morning and stood a little taller. Not because I wanted to be seen, but because I finally saw myself. When June leaned over and whispered, You look like someone who doesn't carry dead weight anymore, I smiled. Because she was right. I wasn't carrying the pain of being misunderstood, or unwanted, or rewritten by someone else's version of the truth. I was carrying only what mattered now, my voice. My peace. My clarity.